Hi guys, welcome back to the Revive Stronger podcast. I'm your host, as always, Steve Hall. Today I'm talking with Brandon Kempter. He is a Master's of Science in Sports and Exercise Nutrition, and he's the founder of BK Conditioning, a bodybuilding coaching service. Today we dive into the depths of physique enhancement, exploring the fine line between science and genetics. We talk about what it takes to get thick skin lean, you heard correctly. We tackle the perennial debate, the dreaded flatness during prep. Is it a necessary evil or a myth perpetuated by fear? Tune in as we dissect nuances of this controversial topic. And speaking of nuances, we delve into the age-old question: do the little things really add up? Are those meticulous 1% improvements worth the effort? Or do they fade into insignificance once the basics are really mastered? Get ready for some thought-provoking insights. And as a reminder, at Revive Stronger, online coaching is our bread and butter. We help people grace the stage, do photo shoots, get bigger, stronger, and become their best selves. We use our extensive experience and the knowledge gained from speaking to the world's leading experts to generate fantastic results. If you're interested in personalized online coaching, where you can ask questions, learn, and get amazing results, be sure to check out our coaching linked in the description as always. But now, grab your headphones and get ready to elevate your understanding of fitness and nutrition with Brandon Kempter. So Brandon, it's actually been 2 years since you were last on the show. I don't know if that sounds like a long time to you or not, but I was like, yeah, that sounds about right. Although I've been keeping up with your stuff, I was like, it does feel like it's a while since we had this one-on-one chat. And that was the first time you were on. It was episode 292. And people really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. I enjoy keeping up with your social media content, even though I know you said you don't share everything over there, which is why I think these long-form discussions are going to be really great. And so it's great to have you back on the show.
Well, thank you very much for having me on. I am super appreciative of that. And it has indeed been quite some time. When you invited me on, I was thinking, when was the last time? So I actually had to you actually searched on YouTube there. And yeah, I think it was 2022. So lots has happened since then. And looking very forward to jumping into some conversation today.
You got your Master's of Science in Sports and Exercise Nutrition, right? That's within that window, you've now got that.
Yes, I finally completed that. I think at the time we last spoke, I would be in the trenches, so to speak, working on that. But I actually wrapped that up as of essentially the center section of last year, which was amazing. That was a bit of a passion project. I probably mentioned the last time on the podcast, I had come off my 2019 season with every intention of jumping back on stage within 18 months, which is sort of the minimum window. As I had unfinished business, still have unfinished business with a WMBF pro card. And obviously COVID derailed that. So I decided, you know what? I would love to do this Masters in Science. So let's do that. And I took that on, and that wrapped up last year. Very gratefully had the opportunity to conduct some research on bodybuilders, some observational research, which was great. We didn't end up publishing that just because we wanted a bigger sample size. But it was lovely to be able to participate in research. Obviously, my undergrad was science-based as well. My fiance is a doctor as well, a PhD. So research is all around. So it was great to do that.
That's actually great you covered that, because I had a question about that research because I was going through social media and as I was researching for this podcast, I was like, oh yeah, you were looking for participants of this study. So did you manage to learn anything from that? Even if it was just about conducting research, what did you personally learn about it?
Yeah, so my master's degree was quite research intensive, which I loved. So, within that, I did a scoping review, looking at the nutritional intake of drug-free bodybuilders. Since then, there's actually been some reviews with a high degree of methodological rigor, which is lovely to see. And the actual research that I conducted was essentially, I have to make me remember here, it's been a little while. But essentially, we wanted to evaluate the nutritional intake of elite natural bodybuilders. And thankfully, we had a very good response in terms of recruitment. The issue we had was essentially the quality of the data we accumulated. So it was survey-based, and perhaps we had a bit of an issue with the settings in the survey. So and essentially, we ended up accumulating enough data to write a great paper, but because we had 50 participants in there, and we could only use a data set of around 10, I believe. There's a lot of incomplete data. People start the the survey go away, etc. So it wasn't to the point where I thought, you know what, this is going to be great for publishing it. But I did learn a lot about research and throughout that process. And more than anything, the results of that were quite confirmational in terms of some of the practices which we, as coaches, do. So, in fact, what I really need to do is a carousel post of the results of that. I should put that out.
I definitely would be interested in that, but I totally, having spoken to obviously tons of researchers on here, like the behind the scenes practical implications of actually doing research, people just don't kind of get that element so often. Like, I don't know, from the outside in, I think the viewers look at it as very easy. It's like, oh, why couldn't it have been double the length? Or why couldn't you have got double the participants? Or why did you miss this little thing? It's like, oh man, it's not that easy.
It is not easy. I mean, look, if we look at, there's a lot of individuals out there who talk about, evidence-based practice, research this, research that on Instagram, who don't read a paper from start to finish, let alone conduct research. There is a lot to the process. It's lengthy, it's incredibly time costly, and there are a lot of challenges in terms of creating methodology that answers the question you want, but you need to understand that there is always methodological limitations. And that's why anyone with a science-based background understands that, one singular paper doesn't tell you a complete story. And oftentimes the conclusion is, well, we learned this, or this, the data indicates this. However, we need future, more research in the area. So it's a never-ending piece, but, every paper brings us one step closer to the truth. And as you alluded to moments ago, when it comes to recruiting participants in exercise, nutrition science, it's hard to get big samples together. I mean, all the research efforts in terms of funding go towards health science. I'm trying to get together, up to 50 participants for my piece of research. And my fiance Rachel was like, 50 participants? Well, in medicine, like, we use thousands of data points. Like, what can you do with 50? That's so underpowered. Welcome to exercise and nutrition science, So it's interesting. It appears not that many people are overtly interested in getting an above average level of muscularity and insanely inside out lean, but go figure.
It's funny. I was just talking to Jose Antonio, who is very well known for his high protein research and how it's not necessarily unhealthy or anything. And he was just saying how we're talking about caffeine and coffee. He was saying how it's really hard to get like coffee drinkers into a study because they don't want to change how they drink their coffee. And I was like, that's just like bodybuilding. Like, people complain about trained lifters like not being in research, like especially heavily trained lifters for 5-10 years. Like, I don't know about you, Brandon, but whenever I look at these studies, I'm like, I wouldn't want to give up my training to go into just a study and kind of hope that it's as good, if not better, than what I'm already doing.
That's a challenging thing. Obviously, Eric Helms very well. I know he's been really pushing some amazing things with his research students, but similar challenges here. Okay, we want to look at a couple of different diet interventions and the effects of that within contest preparation. It's challenging to find participants who are willing to maybe risk any result that is not in alignment with their, desires. So it is really tough. Definitely.
And I know you're in Australia now, if people aren't aware of the Aussie accent as well, but you've actually relocated, right, to Bali, Indonesia?
Yeah, which is incredibly cliche. And I'm not overly loud on that on social media because it appears to be, well, exactly that, very cliche. Every second individual over there is a fitness coach, etc. But yes, we are in Indonesia, and we actually live out there in a local village, which I find very humbling. It's one of the things that I love about going away from the norm. We lived on the Gold Coast, which is previously in Australia, which is, for those who don't know, I'd define it as the bodybuilding capital of Queensland. There is a lot of focus on, well, one's image, from bodybuilding to Botox and breast augmentation. And if that's your thing, go for it. But I'm a country boy. So, heading out to Indonesia and getting amongst, really soul of the earth kind of people there, it really resonates with me. So we're out there, but we are within 25 minutes of fantastic training facility. So we're good to go. taken care of.
Nice. It sounds like it's not the same, but it sounds kind of like the Dubai equivalent of Europe. A lot of people from the UK, Europe go to Dubai as fitness coaches because I guess, well, there's great tax benefits to that, which I'm jealous of. But
Well, Bali doesn't have the same tax benefits, but it does have a very much emerging bodybuilding scene, and I am definitely getting more involved on that. And it's amazing to see what's happening there in terms of the facilities that are coming up, and also the local people there are now, Indonesia as a whole, home to 5% of the global population, is starting to work its way into the global middle class, similar to India for that matter. So you're getting a lot of individuals who can now afford to bodybuild. And what you have within those developing countries is an almost unmatched level of work ethic from some of those locals. For them, bodybuilding it's truly their way out of poverty, for lack of a better term. And it is wonderful to see. So you get these individuals with good coaching, and it is just amazing what can be created. And in future, that's really something I'd love to be a part of, is seeing some of these local guys take it to the stage, because I don't like seeing people, or for that matter, a group of individuals who are underrepresented. It's just like, man, the substance is there in terms of the genetic basis. It's incredible.
I need to make my way. There's a few countries we're talking off air about the amount of travel that you're doing and wanting to do, and I know I need to get to the US more to see a bunch of the people over there, but also I want to get over to Bali. It looks incredible, but obviously you're there now. Yeah. Jackson Pios, Aaron Straker. There's probably I think actually why have I forgotten the name now? I have it in my head. Shredded Glutes. I competed with him at the WNBF Worlds.
Wow. Yeah,
Alberto Nunez coach. Dirk, there we go. Well, you got me the name. Dirk Emmerich. There we go.
Fantastic gentleman. I did catch up with him actually, I think it was last year or the year before. And that was the first time I actually met him in person. Just as nice as you would imagine. And a wonderful ambassador for drug-free bodybuilding. One of the things I love about bodybuilding, not to get off topic, but in the drug-free space, I don't see much ego. And that really resonates with me. There's a lot of respect. When I see someone who's got a phenomenal physique, I think, wow, like Dirk, man, the commitment, you've been grinding away at this for years. I really respect that. And that respect in our game is generally really well reciprocated. It's something that maybe I don't see as much in the IFBB. It's a little bit more kind of, FU energy. And that doesn't sit right with me. I don't like, like that. But Dirk, yeah, amazing guy, great representation of drug-free bodybuilding. It's cool to see.
Yeah, I spent quite a bit of time with Dirk at WNBF Worlds in Vegas, and he's just such a chilled individual too, like very laid back. And I think that low stress has to help him. And actually, Dirk is a great transition to the question that I had for you, the first question I had, which was about Leon Mitchell, in fact, same season. So obviously you coached Leon Mitchell to stage, and I competed against him in 2021 at the WNBF Supernaturals, and he won my class. He then won the pro card, he won the overall. And I remember talking to you a little bit about this, where he just has, and I talked to Andrew Chappelle about this too, where is this level of condition, and I brought this up on the podcast before, where there's just some individuals like a Dirk, like a Leon Mitchell, they get this level of condition, which is just like, there's something special about that. I don't know if every individual, like people, not everyone gets there. Is it just a fat loss? Is there genetic component? He had this level of, he had shredded glutes, like every muscle was in, but also, especially with Leon, this kind of like, people talk about dick, skin, lean, like his skin there's just veins everywhere. It just looks so sharp. So I'd love to hear your thoughts surrounding that.
Yeah. It's not just having general separation between muscles. It's kind of to the point where you can see the fascial interchange between tissues. It's fascinating. Just watch someone walking with hamstrings that lean. It's like, this is fantastic. And I mean, look, is there hereditary? Is that of hereditary influence? I mean, it'd be remiss of me to say it isn't, to a degree. I believe that when it comes to genetics, it influences many aspects. But I mean, one way to define it outside of muscle architecture and shape is that genetics will determine the response you get per unit of input from any given variable: training, nutrition, drugs, whatever. And when it comes to fat loss, I'm sure you've observed, there is individuals who have perhaps a bit of an easier time than others to a degree. The challenging thing is when you're dealing with this complex series of systems that is the human body, and the very complex manner of which it of which it responds to the environment, things get very opaque. Just to anthropomorphize that, things get very unclear. For example, you mentioned that Dirk, he's a very low stress dude. Now that might be a hereditary basis. Some people more chill than others, but also his environment. He's built his environment around that. When I chat to Dirk, he's like, "Yeah, man, I set up my training and I build my life around that. I'm very grateful to be able to do that. I want to scoot to the gym at this time, and I want to train for this amount of time, and that I'm going to have my meal, etc." So he's probably a naturally chill guy, but he's also built his environment around that. So it becomes a little bit challenging to sort of zoom out and say it's one thing or the other. But there's definitely got to be some hereditary influence to a degree. To a degree.
Do you know with Leon, I guess you probably do, is he someone who stays relatively lean? Does he struggle to push weight up?
He does stay relatively lean throughout an off season. And I mean, there was some environmental factors in his last contest preparation. He was doing some crazy work hours, of which required him to be on his feet. So there was a lot of energy expenditure there as well. If we subtract that, then I'm not entirely sure. But I mean, at the time, his energy intake in reference to, let's say, an off-season or contest prep, it made sense. Okay, this total body mass, this body composition, these environmental factors, that's pretty much bang on where you should be from in terms of prediction. Yeah.
Yeah, that's just something I've noticed is the people that end up getting inside out lean often, whether or not they have like a lower intervention point or body fat where they can get to leaner levels without the stress and obviously diet fatigue essentially rapidly ascending. So they just have an easier time kind of getting to that point, and they're normally on much more food than you'd expect.
Yeah, it's interesting. If you look at the energy intake of which you may have an individual on, I mean, I've definitely seen a large spread of expected intakes, if you will. And I mean, if we use general predictive formula for evaluating BMR, etc., it gets us in a ballpark for most individuals, but there are outliers in both directions. I mean, I'm sure you've seen this. I mean, I definitely have, where I've got an individual who is on dirt poor calories, where I would sit here and question nutritional consistency, but having evaluated in close proximity, I'd say, I think they're right where they need to be. And conversely, someone else who is, cruising, so to speak, in terms of their energy intake at the back end of a contest preparation. So it's interesting. But one thing I have observed is that in most scenarios, regardless as to what the energy intake is, the body composition primarily determines the diet-related fatigue they accumulate. So person A, same, let's say you have two people with the same body composition, similar environmental factors, and 700 calories difference, they're probably feeling pretty similar if the magnitude of deficit is similar and their body composition is, well, has far departed their sort of homeostatic norms. So interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I even get it for myself where people are like, "Oh, I'm jealous of you on that amount of food." I'm like, yeah, I probably feel the same as you, but it gives me more freedom and flexibility. I will say at this point within, I don't know if I can even call it prep. If I ask Cliff, my coach, if it was prep, he'd probably be like, "No, Steve, you're not in prep yet." He doesn't want my mentality to go down that route just yet, even though maybe I've kind of let it go that way because of practicing posing and everything, which definitely want to stay on top of. But yeah, I totally see what you're saying there. And actually, this dives us down a nice route where there'd be this general discussion within bodybuilding of like getting flat versus not getting flat. And some people are of the mindset, you need to get flat because that's when you're burning body fat, when you've got rid of the glycogen and you're in a nice flat position. Other people may be of like, hey, no, when you're flat, we need to refeed you back up because when you're flat, glycogen depleted, that's a more catabolic state. And that's something we need to avoid. Where does your head span with this kind of question of like, how far do you push someone to get flat versus making sure they're not so flat we're in a tricky position?
I mean, the first thing I'll say is that some individuals seem to flatten out faster than others. Others seem to, even when they are or should be flat, they don't appear flat in the manner in which they present. So that's another piece to keep in mind. I mean, I have a saying that is, we get flat to get lean, flat to look lean. My clients tend to hear this ad nauseum because I am of the belief that we do need to deplete to a degree muscle, and invariably liver glycogen in order to persuade your physiology to liberate energy from adipose tissues. But as I believe I heard you say, which I loved, something along the lines of, it's okay to dig as long as you can climb out of the hole. Something along those lines I remember you saying. And that actually really resonated with me because the I believe there's times where you need to dig and you need to get flat, and it's appropriate to do so. But there is a point where you get so flat that either you start losing muscle mass and or there's some changes in peripheral nutrient partitioning which don't allow you to fill up enough thereafter. And then it becomes detrimental. And this is where I think refeeds, as unevidence-based as they are, I believe they have applicability outside of simply the psychological benefits. And obviously, one of the limitations in the current research is that, well, no one's evaluated the implementation of refeeds in reference to individuals who are incredibly lean, like that of bodybuilders. So I believe there's an appropriate time to get flat. And if we look at the cycle of which I would, or cycle, the macronutrient cycle from a weekly perspective that I would often implement, it would involve a refeed strategy of some sort, at least from the last 2/3 of the prep. And then I would say usually we're going to deplete, so to speak, even though it's not quote unquote depletion carbohydrate intake, you're going to have some level of glycogen depletion. So we deplete, replete, repeat. That's essentially the pattern that we tend to follow in prep. Whether that repletion phase is scheduled or it's more ad libitum based on look, feel, body mass trends, performance. But generally speaking, we'll fall into a pattern like that. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think that yes, there's an appropriate time to get flat as long as we can pull you out of it. And often, one more thing, I often talk about fullness-flatness ratios. Like how much of the week are we spending, use week as an arbitrary volume of time, how much of the week are we spending flat? And then how much time can we fill up? So I like to fill up more frequently, ideally the closer I get to the stage, because that's when diet fatigue is high. That's where realistically, if this is an issue, if we're at a higher risk of maybe having some issues in terms of peripheral nutrient partitioning. So I believe that we should refeed more frequently there if we can, if the timeline allows.
Yeah, I think that's well described. Again, it's one of those binary situations where you're probably wrong if you're at either end of the spectrum there. It's somewhere in the middle. And I agree with you in terms of refeeds and their applicability during prep seems to be maybe not just physiological. And I'm always like, hey, even if it was just psychological, even if it only is psychological, the psychology and physiology, they're so intertwined. And we talked about stress before, and often refeeds can kind of clear that potential water retention or anything that's going on. Some people end up weighing in lighter afterwards, and it just kind of clears to give you a clearer picture of, especially in those last kind of leg of prep, how's that person actually looking, which is the thing that actually matters.
Yeah, it's interesting, as you mentioned, you get to a point in prep where you're so flat. I mean, don't get me wrong. By the end of a contest prep, if you're living in the body of which is in prep, your capacity and objective is trash. It's gone. No matter how good you are, myself included. I look at physiques all day, but I can't look at my own physique by the end of a contest prep. But there does come a point where when you are very flat, it somewhat hides your fat loss progression. But that's, as I was saying before, get flat to get lean, feel out to look lean. So you've got that once every, depending on the individual amount of time, in the week or fortnight where you're going to replete. And when you replete, oh, wow, I look fantastic. Yes, cool. Now we're able to sort of materialize the previous fat loss from a visual perspective. Rock and roll. Let's go.
And I think where the people come from, where they're against people refeeding and maybe taking diet breaks, and they're like, you need to get flat. It's because people end up, I think, having like a formula in their head where they need to have like, 2 refeeds a week, a diet break every month. It's like, but is your rate of loss appropriate for that? Are you actually losing fat at a pace, or are you going to be fat on stage because you've been refeeding and like diet breaking so much? It's like, keep an eye on actually the rate of loss and the progress of the physique. Like these things matter more than any of those other things.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's I suppose all comes into personalization and planning. Yeah, definitely.
So in a similar vein, this is another one of those kind of divergent topics where people land on either end of the spectrum. This talks about, rather the kind of topic I'm thinking about is people will talk about the details matter, like those 1%ers, and they add up to something significant, especially over the long term. Then there's the other line of thought that's like, hey, once you have the basics down and you're doing the big rocks, those little 1%ers essentially wash out in the long run. You'd never be able to notice them. I'm imagining you're somewhere in the shades of gray, but I'd love to hear kind of where your mind goes when you hear this.
Yes. Look, the scientist in me says everything matters. And whilst it's important to distill down complex topics into the quote unquote big rocks, the finer grains of sand also matter. So the scientist in me says, okay, everything matters, but I understand that there is a point where things are unnecessarily burdensome, and that can actually cut a career short. And that would really break my heart to see that. And I mean, we have seen that in over the years, no doubt, for varied reasons. To be fair, that might be one contributing point. But the way I look at it is like this: we kind of meet an athlete where they're at. So if they're a more novice athlete, we educate them about the big rocks. We get them to focus on the big rocks. And then once they have graduated from the novice to intermediate and they have aspirations of the top level, well, now you're going to have to start thinking about those one percenters. And I also mentioned that when it comes to the big rocks versus the one percenters, my expectations on those components vary between contest prep and off season. So obviously, in the off season, I don't expect even the pro level athlete to just never ever have something that can't be estimated. I think that's pretty wild and probably not sustainable. But in contest preparation for that pro level athlete, I want to nail everything to the point. So we meet an individual where they're at, but I do lean towards, having spent I think 7 or so years in educating through tertiary pathways, we've learned a lot of depth. So we want to apply the variables that influence the result, even if they are the one percenters. So I'm in the middle, but again, we personalize, meet the athlete where they're at. But I do tend to gravitate more towards let's control what variables we can, because the body's a logical series of systems. If we control the right variables, we have a predictable result. And particularly in the context of a contest prep, I want to exploit predictability, because then we're always in sync with the timeline. Life is good. So.
I like that answer. I think it's in that sense, like, don't get the cart before the horse, especially for that novice athlete. Like you see it all the time with people who are just getting to the gym. They're like, what supplements are you taking? Or whatever it might be. It's like, hey man, supplements they're definitely the 1% right at the end that you might focus on. You need to get the macros in place, the calories, the big rocks. And once you're consistently nailing those, you can add on top. So go ahead.
No, I don't. No, I totally agree with that. I was just thinking a good non-bodybuilding related way to look at the one percenters is if we look at the 2020 Olympic Games, in the men's 100 meter freestyle, there was something like a 0.02 second difference between first and second. For the sake of conceptualization, the blink of an eye is about 0.33 seconds. That's a minuscule amount of time. And I love Olympic athletes. So I look at them like, wow, these guys, train a quadrennial macrocycle of 4 years plus to shave literal milliseconds off race times. At that level, you can't tell me the one percenters don't matter. Of course they do. This is 0.02 whatever seconds. Bodybuilding is completely different. But I'd like to take a leaf out of that, right? So if I was Chris Bumstead, just because everyone knows that gentleman, at that level, like, man, if I'm in prep, I don't want to leave anything to chance. So, it sort of scales with I suppose where you're at in your career.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think, again, the person's goal and them as an individual, the more advanced you are, the more serious your goal, the more the finer details definitely matter. I think my concern with some of the 1%ers, at least, is when people attribute a 1% to something that in the end has like a -5%. And it's like you alluded to that, where the stress leads to them not being adherent long term, or they get out of the sport because they're like, this is too much for me. So it's being flexible with those, where it's like, eating by the clock in your off season, strictly like every minute. Like, I don't know if there's ever a time that's super appropriate, but nutrient timing certainly towards like a contest prep, it's going to play a much larger role. But I think some people get obsessed with these minor things, and then it actually ends up hurting the big rocks, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it can. And the way I look at it is, speaking of off season, right? Because it's obviously a longer time point. I often tell my athletes in the off season, I want to find your bespoke combination between doing what's necessary to achieve a high quality result whilst making some quote unquote lifestyle gains. And essentially that allows you to achieve your definition of balance. Now, don't get me wrong, balance is subjective. If your definition of balance is going out 4 times per week, 10 beers on the weekend, I don't think you're really a bodybuilder. But we have to find your midway. And I think that also changes throughout one's life cycle, both in reference to one's level of advancement, but also in reference to situational changes. I can say for me, bodybuilding was really different for me when I was in university in my undergrad. I was very time wealthy. There wasn't much stress in my life. Now, bodybuilding needs to be more structured by virtue of external things. I have other responsibilities. Maybe a parent of two with two children. Okay, now their bespoke definition of quote unquote off-season balance has to pivot a little bit. So yeah, you've got to find that midway. I want to make sure that the willpower tank, so to speak, is full when we start a contest prep, because I believe that willpower is a finite commodity. If they're stressed out of their brains trying to control these micro variables in the off season, and they're starting contest prep and they're so psychologically tired, do they have the oomph in the tank to get through 20 plus weeks of dieting? Probably not. But if you're starting that contest prep, mate, really productive off season, I have found it pretty easy. Wonderful. Now contest prep, it's just a matter of sharpening the tools and we're good to go.
Yeah, I enjoy your perspective so much, Brandon, with these things. It makes me think of the phrase, make it as simple as possible, but no simpler. And that's kind of how your approach to the off season. Make it as easy as possible to get the result, and but no easier in a sense. So I do that with clients. Yeah. Sometimes we're tracking variables and I'm like, hey, we're tracking whatever X steps it might be during your diet phase, during prep. Do we need to focus on that? You're hitting like a rough average all the time. Maybe we remove that, or we have specific macro numbers in the spreadsheet. Do we need to know that? Or can we just put a tick box that you landed within a range? Or do we actually just want to move to calories and protein? And like you said, kind of put it on the back burner as much as possible. So bodybuilding is just like, again, it becomes a lifestyle at this point. That's what you want it to be. And like you said, it's a balance, but it's different for everyone.
I often say like, bodybuilding is always a part of your life. It's just that in some sessions, it's a bigger part. So in the off season, it's like, okay, yeah, bodybuilding is like 30%. And then the rest is, for me personally, like coach, for yourself, coach, content creator, So, but then in contest prep, it's like, okay, now by the end of the contest prep, it's probably 70%. It's occupying your thoughts all the time. And I would say maybe in certain sections of contest prep, that's appropriate. But in the off season, I want the individual to be able to switch on as the bodybuilder and switch off. So they're not gassing themselves out,
That's nice, because it relates to my point of Cliff not making me want it to be prep yet, because I know he's spoken about this where people, they start the diet and they're like, oh, it's prep. So like blinkers are on, can't eat out, like can't socialize, like must be posing 2 hours a day. I don't know, something extreme, they get into this extreme mindset. It's like, you can save that later, because that's like the nitrox like that you've got limited supply of, that you only need at a certain time.
I like that perspective. It's a great perspective in the contest preparation. I will admit, when contest prep kicks in, I tend to really start to gear the individual towards more structure. But it's been really interesting hearing your perspectives of how you're managing yourself right now, and the fact that it's prep, but not really. And that's a lovely place to be. And I think part of that comes down to your experience. Like we watched Berto Nunez prep, the level of experience he has in reference to his body cues and his ultra high level of nutritional literacy lends itself well to a stress-free commencement to contest preparation. And that comes with, maturity in the game. I don't think a novice could do perhaps what you're doing. So it's cool.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm in a lucky position at the moment too, because talking of Dirk, he was Mr. Get Ready Too Early, right? And I think some people probably look at me, the level of leanness I am. I think I'm 10 to 15 pounds above stage and maybe 20 plus weeks from the first show. And so it's like, I can be pretty relaxed and confident and chill about it, because I'm so far ahead of the game at the moment. Obviously, it will titrate to being harder, closer and closer. But Alberto's a great example of someone who's got so much kind of time in the game and skin in the game, rather. His ability to be able to diet without even tracking is like, for me, crazy, because I'm like, I don't know if I'll ever be able to get to that point. I don't know if I trust myself to get to that point.
Yeah, credit to him. I don't trust myself. It's been what, I don't know, 15 years of tracking macros. But credit to him.
Actually, on that point, Brandon, how are you so you said 15 years of tracking macros. Do you kind of year round, are you in a MyFitnessPal and you're tracking things, or how far do you loosen up? What does that look like for you?
Look, I generally track essentially all the time. In the first section of my career, I was competing every year, every 2 years. Through that time, it was just pure focus. In fact, I loved it. It was just one of the things I love about bodybuilding is that everything has purpose, and in contest preparation, that's exemplified. I eat this now because I'm going to train in, 1 or 2 hours. I love that everything has purpose. So I do like to retain a little bit of that in the off season. I just back it off a little bit. I don't necessarily hold myself back from having a date night once a week. That's really important for my fiance and I. And then contest prep kicks in. Okay, we sort of sharpen it up. But generally speaking, I'll track all year round. I used to be tracking within 2 grams for years through the early part of my career. Now I'm going to do that in contest prep, sure, but in the off season, I'll run some wider ranges, and probably very similar to how you would instruct your athletes. We employ, I do this myself also, what I call a 3-tiered tracking model. T1 off season plus or minus 10 for PCF. T2, protein minimum, total calories. T3, not tracking per se, but eating in an informed manner. And I would spend most of my time, I'd say 70% T1, and then that 30% T2 mostly, and the occasional T3, bit of travel here and there. Okay, we're going to be more estimated. But I enjoy that. If I didn't enjoy that, I'd probably, make a bit of a change there. And to be fair, I believe that tracking is for function. When I'm retired from bodybuilding, am I going to track all the time? Probably not. You should have a good enough nutritional literacy to maintain a decent body composition. I track because I want to make progress. And in my scenario, my appetite is so low that if I do not track, I'm going to be, not maximizing my progress.
Do you not see the progress you would like? Are you sick of writing your own programs? Or perhaps you need some accountability in order to stick with a plan? Then it's time to start working with us. We at Revive Stronger offer a truly personalized coaching service. You'll get more than just an email with some macros or random cookie cutter program. With Revive Stronger, you will be the center of our attention. You will receive your own fully individualized training protocol alongside a customized nutritional strategy. We created the coaching around your needs, wants, personal preferences, and your own unique lifestyle. Every single week, we delve into your program in order to make appropriate adjustments so that we get the most out of your time and the best possible outcome. We help both female and male athletes to seriously change their body composition by adding more muscle mass and decreasing fat tissue. No matter if you're a competitive bodybuilder or just want to look better, if you need help with your progress and taking your physique to the next level, our coaching is for you. It's time to make a change. Sign up today and let's revive stronger.
I appreciate that because I'm very similar. You look at my MyFitnessPal, whatever it's called, the number of days that you have logged in, and it's something obscene because I basically haven't not tracked since I started tracking. And so but the same with you. I think tracking doesn't necessarily mean that extreme within 2 grams of everything. It can be all the way up to, I've tracked my protein and calories, or I've tracked half the day and then the other half the day I was mindful about making wise decisions and not to overeat. But yeah, sounds like my appetite's similar to yours in some ways, where you get to this point where it's like, if I didn't track, I'd undereat. And yeah, that would eventually show my scale weight, but I don't want to leave time on the table. I want, like you said, it's for function. You want to make sure you're making the best progress you can each day, depositing those pennies towards that kind of bodybuilding bank account, if you will.
And I'm willing to put money on the fact that there's a level of enjoyment you find tracking. For me, for example, I look at it's like that I'm the architect of my own physique, and there's something that's so central about it. I have other passions too, but I mean, like for me, like there's something so central about controlling this here. It's so amazing. So there is for me a level of enjoyment. I'm tracking here, cool. This is the response that I'm deriving in my body. This is how it makes me feel when I train. This is amazing. So yeah.
That actually lines up nicely for my next question, which was surrounding off-season. Kind of, we talked about balance, tracking, your kind of tiered system in terms of how to go about that. Very much like the dimmer switch analogy of like turning it more on or off, or more on or off, but never fully like off. You're always somewhat guided by the goal of bodybuilding. How do you look at kind of surpluses, maintenance periods, mini cuts? Are those, what's your general philosophy for someone in their off season?
Look, my philosophy has actually changed a little bit over time, in that, in general, I mean, look, I used to be very, I suppose, one-directional in that I want to see dynamic changes in body mass through every section of an off-season. Whereas these days, yes, on the most part, we're going to have dynamic changes up or down in body mass over time. But I am more okay with having short periods where we actually retain a given body mass, acclimate, so to speak, assuming that other metrics are pointing towards progression, i.e. training is progressive, recovery is in a great position, sleep is in a good position, visual progress is improving. I would say, cool, we're in a sweet spot here. We can sit here for a little while. But in general, I mean, yes, generally speaking, we're going to see personally and with our athletes a dynamic shift in body mass, through these push-up phases, mini cuts when necessary. I believe there was a time there where mini cuts were so in vogue that everyone was just chucking a mini cut every 6 weeks or something, probably exaggerating for good measure. But I thought, oh, I like mini cuts, but is it as infrequently as I can?
Yeah. I think that makes so much sense. It's, and again, the right tool for the job at the time. And my mind's gone the same way, where I was less and less convinced by recomp and like the benefit of just staying at a body weight and being able to progress there. And I think that's because I span my wheels, but I think that maybe wasn't nutritionally driven, but it was driven by being too lean and, again, not progressing maybe in the gym how I should be and having the focus there, which is ultimately the driver for muscle gain. Is like, if gym performance is going up, yeah, you're not going to recomp to being Ronnie Coleman or whatever, your biggest and most muscular self, but there's times at which that might be an appropriate place to stay.
Yeah. And look, my thoughts surrounding recomp have actually changed a little bit, largely due to Chris Barricat's work, to be honest. With that said, I mean, like, as you mentioned, you're not going to recomp forever. I think that any recomp of which we accumulate as a advanced athlete is ephemeral in nature. It's transient. I'm not, I don't BS an athlete. So we're going to recomp all the way to, show. Nah, not going to happen. But there's definitely periods where when you have sufficient stimulus behind you, stress is low, sleep's in a good position, where there is an opportunity for a little bit of recomp here and there. And if there is, and we're seeing that, I want to write it out, and then we'll keep pushing up.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I also agree with you that mini cuts for a time did become like in vogue. I don't know if I ended up, I think I did. I was definitely mini cutting too frequently at one point. I can actually attest to that. And I don't know if I contributed to them being in vogue. I think that was partly due to the P ratio discussion, where it was thought the leaner you are, the better, or to a certain extent, the leaner you are, the more of your calories are going to go towards muscle than fat, hence better P ratio. And thanks to like Eric Trexler and co, that essentially got a bit demystified, which I think was really helpful.
Yeah. Actually, I was actually reviewing some of that research from Forbes et al. The early, because it was there was two researchers there, but Forbes is one of the more contemporary researchers in that area in the early 2000s. Just because I'm actually putting together a presentation for our friends at JPS, and I was looking over that, and that's definitely on shaky ground. That whole the premise that there is a preferential increase in fat deposition, the fatter you get, if you will. But interesting topic, yeah.
And the way I've got to off seasons, I don't know if you'd agree with this, but I do think about, I really like those intervention points as kind of like guidelines. It's like, hey, we don't want to be below that lower intervention point because in theory, you're more stressed at that point. You're not going to be in a good position to make gains. So you definitely want to be above the lower intervention point. But as you get to that higher intervention point, equally, you're going to get into a stressed position where, like you said, sleep's not going to be as good, training's not going to be as progressive. So you probably want to just try and stay within this bound for as long as possible.
Yeah. I actually love that model. Obviously, no model's perfect. Some are just better than others. But is it Speakman or Spearman et al., that 2016 model with the lower intervention range, upper intervention range? I love that. I often bring it up on screen when we're talking with some of our athletes, because it's interesting. You gain for long enough, you will experience all those hallmark, components, lethargy, low appetite, etc. When you diet and you go below that lower intervention zone, every hallmark indicator of low energy availability you will experience. So it's just, it makes sense. It's a fascinating model.
I'm actually interested. Sorry, Brandon. I was just going to say, I'm interested. You mentioned your appetite's poor when you push up. I don't know if mine's really, I think, an extreme example of like, I don't know, hard gain or whatever it is, like extreme ectomorph kind of mentality. I get to a point where I just like wake up to have breakfast and I will feel nausea associated with trying to eat that meal. and it will take me like an hour to eat it, and I'll get like a full stress response. Like it's like I don't know any of my clients who have really had this, but I don't know if you've had the same, where it's just like it was not worth eating that breakfast. So I'm like, okay, I need to just go into like an auto-regulated mini cut to get my appetite in a better place.
I mean, my appetite is in general low, but I don't know if I experienced anything like that. I will say that when I was a teenager and I was very active in my occupation as well, working on a gym floor, my energy intake would be, you know, up toward that 6,000 calorie mark. Obviously, I was also in a position to accrue muscle at a much faster rate. At that time, that was the most challenging period I've ever had in reference to eating. It'd be, you know, I'm going to sleep with my stomach pressing up against my diaphragm, breathing really shallow because it's like, oh my gosh, or I'm walking to bed with an arch on my back, this nice anterior pelvic tilt because my stomach is just jamming me in the diaphragm. So I don't experience that anymore because I don't require a surplus of that kind of magnitude anymore. And I'm also much less active, probably similar to you. Actually, you're more active than I at 10,000 steps. I did see that post. Whereas I'd be more like 5,000 steps if I go for a walk. So my energy intake these days, I'm gaining, it's 3,800 calories, but I'm still looking at that 3,800 calories going, I reckon 3,000 would be really nice for me. But yeah, I'll chew through it, but not to the level you're getting, my man. That's crazy.
Yeah, I don't know if I have something like my digestion takes a turn for the worse. Like I know my body just like gets rid of it through multiple trips to the toilet. Like it's just I hit this ceiling, and I don't know if there's some sort of IBS or something like undiagnosed that I have something going on there, because it's something that's very different. But I'm always interested because I'm like, it's not the sheer quantity of food. It's just I tend to hit a body weight where my body's just like, you ain't going above here because we're going to give you all these horrible symptoms. So
it's interesting that, because for me, if I'm within, I suppose, what I would define as my usual, my comfy zone, which is a few kilos lighter than now, I will probably happily eat 3,500 calories thereabouts to appetite. Once I go a little bit higher, then my comfortable level of food is more like 3,000. This is my body really trying to assertively keep me in that intervention zone. And obviously, the majority of my food selections are minimum processed micronutrient dense foods. When we consume those sort of foods, which the body was originally, I suppose you could say, built to consume, those homeostatic drivers for appetite regulation actually work. And I try and refrain from really consuming a whole lot of processed food selections. Perhaps the sensations I experience are in part psychosomatic, but I know that there's been periods where, you know, I do a couple of days eating some very dense food selections, sometimes at the expense of, well, minimally processed food selections. I look at that, I'm like, hey, I didn't do 7 years of nutrition education to eat like this. You know, I know what my body's needs are in reference to micronutrient requirements. Let's take care of this. And that definitely makes it harder for us to consume sufficient calories.
yeah, absolutely. And I will say, I've tried like mass gainer shakes and everything, and I still hit this like wall of just like doom, and I can't do it. But I think there's actually a question that I wanted to ask you is, I think there was for a time, and I don't know if this is still the case, but a lot of natural bodybuilders would be like, you have to hit new peaks of high body weight. So you need to be continuously pushing body weight up to gain more muscle. Where do you land on that? Do you think you always have to keep pushing new highs, or do you think you can gain just within a range of like leaner body weight, if you will?
I think if you're in the novice to intermediate level, then it's probably smart to be hitting quite frequent new body weight highs. I mean, even if we look at the early part of my career, yeah, I was hitting a new high in body mass in the off season, then a new level of conditioning, plus a new high in stage weight in the years that preceded, at least the first few years. So I think for a novice athlete, it's a good idea. Perhaps as a more advanced athlete like you and I don't think I'm ever going to really have to get my body weight over 105. I generally sit my majority of my off season between 95 to a 103-ish, which is maybe 104, which is where I'm going to be pushing at the peak of this off season before my pre-prep. So I mean, I know I don't need to go above and beyond that anymore, just because we're wringing out the sponge, so to speak, for every last drop in our genetic potential. So yeah,
I agree with that. I think you're not going to be able to, you need to put on, like, you need the building material to kind of get up to a certain amount of muscle mass. You're not going to put on 30 pounds unless you go up there and a bit above that initially. But I'm not going to be over 200 pounds, like, shredded on stage. So I don't need to go to 220, 230. That's just like madness at this point.
Yeah. In my head,
I wish I would
yeah,
be.
let's go, but that's not how it works.
And
But
sorry, go for it.
I was just going to say the question for you is, so in reference to off-season body weight, or off-season body composition, I believe, so I want to take myself or my athlete to where performance is. And I believe body composition plays into this, not just in terms of energy availability in its purest definition, nor global energy availability, as I would say is, the amount of body fat mass you're harboring, but also in terms of levers. So I personally tend to sit probably a little bit softer compared to yourself, because I know it's where I need to go to be able to create a lot of rigidity and tightness through my spinal column, to really feel, good around my knees and hips, so a bit of cushion around there. So that's where I need to go for performance. But I do observe that some individuals are, as I describe, greyhounds. They seem to be able to stay a little bit leaner, perform really well. Maybe that's you, Steve. I don't know. But
I like the description of greyhounds. That's great. And yeah, I agree with you, because when I think about the drivers of muscle growth, it is training. That's the thing that has to be prioritized. So if you need to be a bit softer to have your best training, absolutely go there. And I wouldn't hold someone back from that. Obviously, there's limits to it, because if you're a competitor and you have a timeline in place, you can't go too far. And I would say I'm more to the lower end of, I can stay quite lean and see good performance. And you just go where you kind of let the person in front of you drive that.
Yeah, I do find with some individuals, who perform really well with a little bit more chunk on, so to speak, sometimes where they perform best is just not where you want to start a contest preparation. And that's essentially where I'm at now. That's why the pre-prep is there. But I want to spend most of the off season in that really productive zone. So, yeah.
You're looking to compete June 2025 from my research. Is that right?
Oh, your research is good. Yes, indeed. I've never actually competed in the middle of the year. I always do the end of the year because it is generally most competitive. The reason I'm doing season A, or as we would call it in Australia, season A, the middle of the year, is because there is less pressure on me as a coach. So, things change. I want to be able to focus solely on my athletes. The last time I competed, at one of my shows, I was backstage, pro shows in the evening, and I've got 10 athletes that day. That is a manic day. So lesson learned from that is okay, can I make it a bit easier? Yes, maybe do in the middle of the year. There's some great shows available in the United States. No matter what, I want to step up against where the best I can possibly do. Then it's a matter of measuring up for me. If you win, I'm cool. If not, I'm I want to see what this physique looks like against the best at the time. And then I'm going to have some stuff to go back to the drawing board. Let's continue to experiment with this physique. So yeah, June, yes.
That makes sense. I remember talking to, I think it was Peter Fitchen recently, and he competed earlier in the year too for the exact same reason. There are so many competitors who are competing towards the end of the year, which makes sense. I'm in a fortunate position. I don't work with, the majority of people I work with aren't competitors. So I only have a handful. I have never had 10 people at a show, let alone in a week, let alone probably in a month. So I can't imagine how much of a stress that is. Even thinking about competing it, I have had it where I've competed at a show and I've had a client or two, and that's okay. That's manageable. But when you've got a lot of people and you're competitive yourself, Brandon, you want to give your best shot. You're a bodybuilder. I don't want to say first and foremost, it probably is hand in hand with being a coach, but you'd hate to not give it your all, right?
Oh, it'd be, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that last show where we had that volume of competitors, I flew my darling mother down, and I had my fiance there, and they were able to pump up all the guys. Everyone had their plans, so they're good to go. I was able to relax a little bit, but it still plays in your mind there. So that's the reason for doing the middle of the year. I know someone's going to say that's a cop out, but got to make it work.
No, for sure. And do you have goals this time? You were very close, I believe. I don't know if I'm wrong with this. Did you get to WNBF Worlds last time, and then you won your class, and then you were in the overall for a pro card? Is that right?
No. So I did a variety of shows through that season. I had great success with ICN. I had great success with INBA. I did the Universe, and then I did the WNBF Worlds as well. I got a second in the WNBF Worlds. It was a great lineup. That's that. I did wear the wrong tan, which is quite silly. Whether that affected placings or not is hard to know. But that was really a big goal of mine is to go where the best is, and that is, I mean, to this day, that is the WNBF Worlds, at least at the moment. But no, I just missed out on that. And that's part of the reason I wanted to come back 18 months later, which is sort of, to me, the minimum time that I would come back to the stage, 18 months, because I wanted to push for that.
Do you remember was it Gerard who beat you at Worlds? Do you remember? From the UK?
Yes, from the UK. Bit older than myself. Bit shorter. Also
Dorian Yates looking like.
Yeah, quite a dense guy. Nice guy. Had a good chat with him backstage. Actually, we were pumping up. Yeah, nice dude.
I've
seen him
competed.
No,
he hasn't. I've competed against him 2017, and we did like the UK FBA qualifier. We went to the finals, and I think he came. I don't want to say it wrong. I think he was in like the top 4 for sure at the finals. And yeah, he just needed to dial his conditioning, and he was winning like things easily because he was dense dude, guy.
Yeah, is that a little bit shorter? I often say, the best height for a bodybuilder is 170, 175. It means you can roll with anyone. If you're 165, it's a bit hard to roll with the taller guys. If you're 180 like myself, it's like, okay, we're going to fill this physique out, but 170s, whoa, it's great. So,
how are things moving in Australia? Because I know WNBF Worlds is still weight classes, whereas like the WNBF UK is height classes, and the UK FBA are now height classes. Do you have like a preference for which? Because I guess at 180 you would be in tall.
Yeah, I would be in tall. To be fair, I don't know which I'd be more competitive in, but I do like old school weight classes, and the WNBF is a 24-hour weigh-in, and that to me is fun because, as you know, there is means of transiently influencing body mass, and that to me is just another layer of strategy. It's to me, it's about gamifying the system, really. I'm like, oh, cool, okay. So now we're going to do some funky things with manipulating GI volume, maybe even transiently, changing hydration status. And I'm going to take the 81 kilo or the 81 kilo bodybuilder into the sub 79s and then push them up 24 hours later. I like this. It's fun. And also, I believe one of the things which pushed WNBF to such incredible conditioning standards was weight classes. Because people wanted to push. I want to get to the middleweight. I want to get to the middleweight, for example, whatever they're striving for. So I think it pushes conditioning, and I love that. So I do like weight classes. But it's in Australia, to answer your question, it's a mix. Every promoter can choose. I want to do under 77 over 77, under 72, or I just want to do height classes. So it's a mix. It's a wash.
Yeah, I definitely see. That's funny. I've never looked at it as like a positive, really. In terms of manipulating body weight, I found it as like a stress. But I get it actually, because we considered doing it with my client last year, Rob, for Worlds, to get him down into the lights, I think it was. We didn't need to do it in the end because he was coming in light enough. But we were going to do like a rapid backload with that, and it was ended up. We tested it. It was quite stressful. He was like traveling and everything. It just wasn't maybe worth it for him. But in the end, we didn't need to. And I think it was, I don't know, was it Jeff Alberts was like spitting in a bucket or something backstage to try and make the lights or something like this, his last stage presence. And I've seen people, and I guess the reason maybe they've moved away from it is because people do some silly things where they become dehydrated and cause problems. But I get it from your angle now when I think about it, doing it smart from a coaching perspective. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, look, I understand it can be very dangerous. I mean, don't get me wrong, I wouldn't expect someone to be doing a full fight, like a fighter would for body weight manipulation. You can't afford to do that level, 10% down or something crazy, because you're just not going to replete in time and, balance your electrolytes again. But yeah, if you know what you're doing, you can do it safely. And if you want to push for the highest level, you're a very experienced individual, it can work. One of our guys recently, Z, we did something similar. He did the IFBB, which is obviously untested, and he won the under 70. But I mean, he's about 72, 73. So we had to do some pretty funky things to get him under. He also happens to be a very chill guy, one of the nicest guys you'll meet, but very relaxed. So for him, he's like, it's fine, but you just tell me what to do. I do it, man. Don't worry about it. So he can manage that. But if you had someone who was a hypochondriac, like, yeah, this is going to be a problem. I'm 300 grams over. What do I do? No, okay, too much stress.
Yeah, there's only so much you can do with height. You maybe you can stand up, don't sleep, just stand up, or try and sleep standing up, and then gravity can like take off. I don't know how much it takes off, but you are shorter at the end of the day than at the start of the day because of gravity.
But yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, it's a bit of a wash here for sure.
I've seen the craziest seen for height is people doing spinal decompression, where they flip themselves, like they strap themselves into like some sort of bed and flip themselves for a number of hours, I guess, to try and meet a certain height class, which is quite wild.
You're going to send a two out of it.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, with the inversion table, you'll get a bit more. I call it. So when you measure someone's anthropometrics, you'll do their stretch stature, which usually involves them hanging for a while, then do their height. I don't know what the mean difference is, but it definitely makes a difference.
So if you're on the cusp, you've heard it here. that people are going to start doing that.
A couple of years over, you see someone hanging out front of the bodybuilding venue.
My last question for you, Brandon, is just purely out of interest. I don't know what sort of answer I get from this, but you speak I guess you use certain terminology, you speak very clearly, you use maybe nomenclature and words that aren't as commonly used, I would say, by many individuals. I'd love to know where that comes from for you. I like it. I think it's great.
I couldn't tell you. To be honest, I mean, look, I do listen to a lot of podcasts like this lovely podcast. But in adjunct to that, I think reading a lot of research papers over the years, you pick up on different languages along the way, and the English language is incredibly diverse. So I pull my influence personally and as a coach and competitor from, I suppose, many angles. But reading research papers is it's something I really do enjoy. Even just when I'm reading, exploring the English, lexicon, which is again really diverse. So it's probably mostly from I say that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I get it sometimes when I talk to my partner, and she'll just laugh at me for using a certain word, and I'm just like, but that's just a fine word. She's like, I know it's fine, but who speaks like that? And I'm just like, okay, I don't know. Maybe it is from sort of, talking to people like yourself, and I put out these words.
Furthermore, it is actually quite nice to use, a diverse section of the English lexicon, considering that where we live, Rachel and I, when we speak very poor Bahasa Indonesia, but it's nice to be able to, and even when I am speaking English to an Indonesian, I need to simplify. So it's nice to be able to have a good conversation.
Yeah, for sure. Brandon, so thank you so much for your time. I always enjoy these chats with you because very obviously you come from like a scientific research driven background, but obviously have so much practical experience too. And that's the people I love talking to have a mix of the both, because I think that's where you get the real gold. So yeah, thank you so much for your time. If people want to kind of keep up to date with everything you're doing, maybe reach out to you for coaching, where should they head?
Yes, thank you so much, by the way, for having me on. Do appreciate it. I am most available on Instagram because I'm very poor with TikTok. I'm not up with the cool kids yet, but you can find me on Instagram at Brandon Kempter, and I should be putting out a lot more content as we're discussing off air. Perhaps there's good motivation to do so, but you can find me there. For coaching, there is a link there to our website, which is bkconditioning.com. Good to go.
Excellent. I'll make sure that's linked. And yeah, I'm with you on TikTok. I'm hoping eventually it's just going to die a severe death. I saw it was like blocked in the US or something maybe. So yeah, anyway, Instagram's the way to go.
I hear about that, but I just couldn't get with it. So
yeah. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you again, Brandon. We'll catch you soon.
Losing weight fast while maintaining muscle mass. Sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? It isn't though. It's reality, and we know how to do it, and we will help you achieve this. The mini cup movement is an 8-week fat loss program to make you lose a huge chunk of fat while maintaining muscle mass at the same time. We will support you from the beginning to the end so that you see the results you would like to and come out of it much stronger. You'll receive a fully automated spreadsheet that is based on your nutritional needs. You can choose between 6 different male and female training templates. Over 30 videos will guide you through each and every single step of the mini-cut so that you're getting the most out of your journey and that you always know what to do. But the best thing is that you can start whenever you want. The mini-cut movement is open 24/7. So if you want to learn more or you're ready to sign up, hit the link in the description below. So let's revive stronger together.